Hello everyone. Clue for Evidence News interview series is back with yet another exclusive interview. Today we have with us Dr. Deepthi Puranik ma'am. Ma'am has PhD in psychology from University of Mumbai. She is also associate member of British and European Polygraph Association. Ma'am have reported more than 1,000 cases related to forensic psychological evaluation. Currently, she is assistant professor at MIT University of Behavioral Science, Mumbai. She is also the founder of Lighthouse Psychological Consultancy. Ma'am, I, Rita Sharma, welcome you on behalf of the entire team of Clue for Evidence Foundation. We are glad to have you today with us. Ma'am, all these years you have been dealing with several forensic psychological techniques and instruments. So, how's your experience working with them?
Okay. To start with, thank you for inviting me for this entire exclusive program. So I'm really thankful and grateful to you. Talking about my experience in the field of forensic psychology for past 18 years, it has been a tremendous experience because there are different kinds of cases that you get to see which normally in our regular circumstances we can't see. So obviously while dealing with cases, I was able to get a opportunity to work with cases related to serial murders, rape, terrorism cases, then cases of national interest, and each and every case that I have been dealing with, obviously it has apart from what we are doing, like apart from what case we are working, it is also giving us lot of insight into human behavior or human interactions, like how to get information from them, how to build rapport. And obviously each and every individual that you are dealing with is completely from a different background. So they come from various backgrounds. Some are from good backgrounds, some are from not so very well good psychosocial backgrounds, or socioeconomic status is not that great. So depending, so obviously it's a lot of learnings that you get to know. Each and every case teaches me personally lot of things in these years. So it has obviously helped me enhance my own knowledge and expertise in the field.
Okay, ma'am. So, according to you, in today's time, we have seen that there are a lot of psychological theories that explain the criminal behavior, and as you have been working in the field, so according to you, which behavioral theory actually explains that how a person's mind is developed so they can turn into a serial killer?
Okay. So if we are talking about it from the psychological theories point of view, okay, I personally feel it's not just the cognitive theory or just the behavioral theory. It's the combination of both, the cognitive as well as behavioral theory. Because a person who is committing an offense, obviously his cognition, his thought processes are involved in it. At the same time, his actions pertaining to what he is learning or how he is doing. So obviously behavior also, both are interlinked with each other. So I personally don't look at it as two different things. I feel cognitive behavioral perspective towards an individual that makes him do an action is an important work, whether it's serial killer or whether it's any other crime. But obviously it's both, like cognition as well as behavioral theory. So a lot of times it's when we look at behavioral theory, what is social learning or how social learning has helped an individual or made his makes him commit an offense is an important factor, because somewhere he is learning from his own environment. At the same time, how his cognition has developed, what are the developmental perspectives are also equal. So I would say that it's a you cannot look separately at these two theories, but when you are studying an offender or a criminal, you have to look at from both the theoretical perspective, in fact from other theoretical perspectives as well, because all of them gives you different insights into the same individual.
Okay, ma'am. So, ma'am, for you, it has been a very long journey. You are in the field from past 18 years. So, ma'am, initially when you started,
Hmm.
or maybe when you were studying, so what are the developments you have observed then and now?
Okay, when I started working, obviously, the most important aspect or change that I have seen is these 18 years is in terms of the awareness that has been created with respect to the field of forensic psychology. If I look at it 18 years back, very few people knew about what forensic psychology is or how forensic psychology is in India, though it had been applied for many years, but still that awareness pertaining to the entire field was somewhere lacking, which I have seen developed in these many years. Like last 18 years, I have seen there are lots of changes. There are many universities which have come up, which who have started courses, full-time courses in forensic psychology, diploma courses. So depending on the way global changes are seen, or even changes are seen in the criminal world, the way crime scenes themselves have evolved. In the same way, I look at the field, that the field also has evolved in many years. So it's still in the developing stage. So there's lot of scope, where it's going to develop, and it will. It's right now going to spread its wings throughout the world.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, even when today, when we took psychology,
Mm.
like sorry, we took forensic science basically when 3 years back. So everyone was like, what field it is, and it is so new. So for you, when you took it
Mm.
18 years back, so what you went through?
Basically, when I took it 18 years back, at that time, somewhere it was under the glare of media. I mean, when we talk about narco analysis or polygraph case, if you have heard of Telgi scam, okay? So, Telgi scam and all had come up in which the test of narco analysis and all were used were shown even in the media. And somewhere that was the journey, I would say, which has begun. So, obviously it was a new field, people were not more much aware of it, but at the same time people were looking to it. I mean, what are the experts doing, how are they handling the cases and all. So obviously all the attention was paid towards the cases that we were dealing with. So if you look at that time, there were very significant cases which happened during that uh, duration. One was like Nithari case, if you look at it, or Arushi murder case, or
Yes,
even
ma'am.
cases of terrorism, like 2611 case or train blast. So all these cases had happened in that time. So obviously, in from many labs, like different labs, were using these techniques on the offenders or suspects who were suspected to have been involved in it. So it's been from there. So I mean, obviously, it has evolved a lot in these years, but then experience, obviously, at that time, every time we are learning from it.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, actually, like now you are an academician in the field, and you
Hmm.
have seen the field also in the laboratory. What do you should be curriculum of the subject? Like what people or students should be actually taught, which is needed for them to go and when they practice.
Okay. See, when we look at the entire field, or right now when we are dealing with the curriculum, okay, looking at the curriculum, obviously, like I said, the change keeps happening every 5 years or 10 years down the line. There are going to be new fields that are coming up, or new crime scenes. Like at present, the focus is entirely on cyber crime. So the field of cyber psychology and cyber crime and psychological interaction has lot of scope. So obviously we need to then include it in our syllabus of forensic psychology, because it is directly related to the field of forensic psychology. Similarly, when we look at each and every case, if you look at most of the cases, you find that the physical evidence is no longer like people are also watching television, they have access to technology, so they also know how to dispose of after the crime. I mean, how to get rid of the evidence, that one should not leave any traces behind. So all that awareness is there even with the offenders. So then from that perspective, we need to have latest technologies and latest techniques which are evolved throughout the world, that should be added every 2 years into our syllabus. So I mean, looking at the entire changing scenarios, you need to keep on updating your curriculum and keep giving students the knowledge that is there at present as well as in the history. So history, present and future also to some extent, like what can happen in future. You also need to look at those perspectives and then include that in the curriculum as well.
Ma'am, as nowadays people are talking a lot about mental health, and it's like all of a sudden it's hyping in society. So actually, the topic is it has before, you know, people committing suicide, and people should be vocal about it before. But what do you think? Like now, it is the right time to be vocal. Why you think like all of a sudden people are emerging and talking about it this much?
Okay, see, when we talk about mental health, okay, as a mental health professional, most of us have been working in the field trying to create awareness. But even then, you know, the thought that what if I go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, somewhere those things were looked upon negatively. However, with the current changing world, or even when we look at the pandemic that we are facing right now, obviously the anxieties are quite a lot. I mean, people realize that it is the need of an hour, that they should seek counselors or they should seek professional help, because they know that this cannot be just they cannot be helped sitting at home, that no one is going to give them a magical solution. They have to work towards it. At the same time, uh, what is happening is that the awareness is also being created by the entire field of psychologists through various programs or uh, through talk shows as well as through some series. So entire mental health awareness, in fact every year there are mental health awareness programs as well, which are performed, so that people become more and more aware that when is it that they should seek help. So obviously, if we look at current scenarios, also we look at, in fact, recently there have been cases of film stars who have committed suicide. So another entire concept of why does an individual go to an extent of committing suicide. So when should they should be, so if they can commit suicide, somewhere even people realize that, okay, it's not that bad thing to seek help of a mental health professional. In fact, it's important that you seek help of a mental health professional at the right time, so that you can save your own life, your family, the entire issues, or the uh, like the entire family goes through the issues. It's not just that when you face a problem, it's only you who are facing that problem. It's entire family who along with you also have to go through this process, which is very stressful. So I mean, somewhere that awareness is being created, and it will be created, so people are going to become more and more aware of it as well as required.
Ma'am, when we talk about psychological techniques, polygraph is still considered as, you know, very reliable, but it is also very vulnerable, like to both physical and psychological countermeasures. And it also suffers from a significant error rate based upon inconclusive false positives or false negative results. So, how affects the investigation process?
See, in fact, as per the Supreme Court judgment, okay, 2010 Supreme Court judgment, the test of polygraph, BIOS, or narcoanalysis, all these techniques are going to be used for the process of investigation. Now, when we use polygraph for investigation, obviously it is going to give a direction to the entire case scene. entire case scenario. So in fact, when we start with it, it also depends a lot on, you know, the amount of information that we have about the case. How does an expert creates the questions? How does the entire graphs are taken? Is the person very comfortable? So all these things are being monitored by the expert. Like they ensure a polygraph expert will ensure that the person is not that anxious. He is comfortable with the entire system. Okay, the preview is done about how the entire process is going to happen. So you remove the element of surprise. So also after that, it's like normally you will take 3 trials. So again, when you conduct 3 trials, you are somewhere trying to, you know, control any other external factors that might be influencing the entire physiology. So all these care is taken. Also apart from that, there's also a system of, you know, where we ensure more reliability by using blind raters. So a person's, when you conduct a test, the graphs are analyzed by one expert. But apart from that, these graphs, without displaying the name of the offender, will also be given to some another expert. The graphs are sent, who will again analyze the report, and then that is how you enhance the reliability, and certainly it will help the investigating process. So there are ways in which, you know, we remove all those inconclusive reports or false positive. So you have to keep a check of it before you actually give the report.
Okay, ma'am. So, ma'am, when we usually talk about I have seen a lot of documentaries and a lot of content is there on web. And when we actually study about a criminal, it is seen that their childhood hasn't been in a good condition, and it affects a lot. So, according to you, at what measure does your parenting and like how you raise a child and how the environment is provided to a child affects its psychological growth?
Okay. In fact, when we talk about family or, you know, parenting, I personally look at that it is the most important or the critical factor that impacts the how the development of the child is going to take place. So for that matter, the family entire environment itself is very critical to the upbringing of the child, because if there are the problems that are seen in the family, the child is most likely to suffer the consequences of this entire family environment. So obviously there has also been lot of studies which have already shown that families who have poor communication or who have weak family bonds, they have a very significant correlation with the children's development. So they tend to get developed into, you know, aggressive children or violent behavior, so which may lead an individual to criminal behavior. Similarly, you know, when we look at family structures also, sometimes how much attention a child is he getting right attention, or the child is not at all getting an attention, poor attention is being given. So obviously all these factors strongly influence the childhood development, and somewhere they are obviously related to the criminal behavior or the offender behavior. In fact, it's going to so there would be some amount of positive correlation in between these two factors, and that's why parenting or the family relationship, they are the core when we talk about any individual who would have been involved in a criminal behavior. So for that matter, even if we are looking at the cases of terrorism, or we are looking at the background of an individual who was involved in a murder or even in a rape or even any other kidnapping, if we look, we need to also study the family background and how the bonds the person shares with his own family. In fact, that itself gives us an entire clarity, you know, that most important factor is family. So family has a very strong connection when we talk about childhood's development, in fact, into a criminal behavior.
Ma'am, like when we are talking about this pandemic, so mostly people come up with a lot of negative things, this did that, and people are suffering from economical crisis and mental health. But I think this pandemic gave us a whole new approach towards academics, like online classes. So, what do you think about it? Like, is it healthy or not? And even if this pandemic ends, do you think that we should continue this practice?
See, certainly when we look at this pandemic, somewhere when we look at these online classes and all, it has turned out as a magical, wand. Okay, wherein we have still not lost connections. In fact, we have developed lot more connections because of this pandemic. Wherein otherwise we wouldn't have even thought of having a session online. Okay, so though online courses have been there since lot of time, but this pandemic certainly brought about a new perspective. Like if you look at the education sector itself, okay, no classes have been disrupted because of the pandemic, that we are at home and we can't interact or classes cannot happen. In fact, online classes have been going on, even exams have been conducted. The interaction continued. Otherwise, obviously, it would have had another impact, where we are all in isolations, we can't talk to each other, and then obviously lot other mental issues would have also come up. So obviously, when we look at online classes or what are the good things that this pandemic gave us, it's certainly one of the important factor that online classes came up and it gave us a new thing. Now, even if this pandemic ends, okay, I feel it should be a combination of online classes as well as individual one-to-one classes, because somewhere though there have been lot of advantages of online classes, yet what we miss in these online classes is a personal interaction or going out for a cafe. So even if you have a coffee there, I have a coffee here, still that somewhere that bond would be missing. So those interactions are equally important for a development of any individual. Apart from that, there are many courses in which you have to actually teach things practically, which is not possible through complete online mode. I mean, certainly in this pandemic, online mode has given us a amazing new ways to still continue with our learning, but at the same time somewhere where those practical inputs are going to come into picture. Like when we talk about psychology has lot of practicals which have experiments which have to be performed. So all those things, so I feel it should be a balance of both online as well as regular one-to-one class.
Ma'am, when we talk about various techniques, there are like narco-analysis and brain fingerprinting, which are used as investigative tool in forensic psychology, but the reports are still not admissible in the court of law. So, what do you think is the reason behind it? And do you think when accepting scientific evidence more frequently in the courts can help bringing in some new revolution in our judiciary system?
Actually, in fact, like I said, when we had started, okay, at that time the reports have used to be considered in the court of law. We used to go and even stand as an expert witness in the court of law. So for most of the many cases, the reports have gone to the courts. In fact, there have been judgments also which are given in terms of brain electrical oscillation signature profiling, what the technique is. The experts were called in the court, and their witness was taken before a decision was being taken. But obviously, was used to be considered only as a corroborative evidence. It was, like I said, even before, and sometimes when the question came of polygraph. So even in 2010 judgment, according to the Supreme Court judgment, so at present these techniques can be used for the investigation when a person volunteers to undergo the test. So and that consent has to be taken in front of the magistrate. So when the consent is taken in front of the magistrate, then these tests are performed, and then the report is given to the court as well as to the investigating agencies for the investigation. So if we look at this entire thing, that it's not that these techniques are not being used. In fact, these techniques are very well being used for investigation, and they have helped in many important cases. So, after the use of these investigated, along with that, there are also other evidences which are presented to the court, or which helps in getting more and more physical evidences. So, these tools play a very important role when we talk about investigation.
Ma'am, now as you also said, I mentioned the technique that is brain electrical oscillating signature profiling.
Oscillation signature profiling, yes.
Yes, ma'am, which is a technique developed by India itself now, and
Right.
it is also your topic of PhD. So, ma'am, what do you want to comment on this scientific technique? And do you think that in near future, this technique can overshadow all the other major investigative techniques?
See, if I'm talking about brain electrical oscillation signature profiling, in fact, this is a technique which is developed by Professor Mukundan in India itself. And it's a very important technique, mainly because this technique is not looking at, lie detection or from detecting deception point of view, but it is looking at from the perspective of trying to enhance or trying to look for a memory in the brain of the perpetrator who may have actually committed an offense. So it is directly looking for the memory when an individual commits an offense. So it uses like electroencephalogram and lot of other parameters. So it's a very scientific technique, and certainly very important tool when it looks for when we look at the investigation point of view. Also, if I'm from the cases point of view, at present I can't say that whether it will overlap, because every case, the requirement of each case and its investigation is different. So depending also on the cases and what are we supposed to find out, we normally take a decision in terms of which test has to be used. But certainly the reliability or reliability of brain electrical oscillation signature profiling is very high. It is almost around 95%, and it's a very important tool because we can get information from the brain of the perpetrator even when the person is not speaking. Okay, because he's not supposed to speak anything, he's just supposed to listen to the probes with his eyes closed. And what we are trying to look is whether the memory is present in the brain of the perpetrator. And this memory will be present only when they are involved in an action. The memory is not going to be present when they were not involved in that particular event, what we call as crime. So the memory will be present only in the brain of the perpetrator if they were involved in the crime. So obviously it's a very important person.
Ma'am, nowadays criminals are also very up to date, and they know about all these techniques. So it is very easy for them to at times regulate themselves, like when during narco analysis or polygraph. But do you think in this brain oscillation signature technique they can do that? Like if the technique is used widely in near future, so that can be done?
They cannot play with it. No, you can't play with your memory. Your memory, if you have participated in any event which we call as crime. So if you have participated in the crime, the memory will be there in your brain. It's not going to be like, I can't just decide I don't want this memory, I'll remove it out. So that cannot happen. So the memory will be present in the brain of the perpetrator if they have committed a crime. And if they have not committed an offense, obviously it will also give us an idea that the person does not have a memory, which means that that individual is not involved in that act, or he has not participated in the act. In fact, brain electrical oscillation signature profiling can, in fact, it also helps us not just to get the information about the person's involvement, but it also helps us distinguish between the roles that are played by each individual. So if one person is only a witness, another person is the one who has actually committed an offense, the third person was the planner. So in fact, this technique helps us distinguish each and every role that the person may have played in that event. So that is also what is possible when we use brain signature profiling with right probes. So obviously it's a very long and process, and but if trained properly, an individual using this techniques, we have solved many cases, and certainly more and more cases would be solved using this technique. So it gives
Ma'am,
a complete new dimension to the entire crime.
Ma'am, actually, like I'm very interested in the field, and so like as a psychologist, you came across a lot of people who criminals and maybe someone who is mentally ill. So we would like you to share something, some case or some incident which actually impacted you in a way, or like there was something you might get disturbed about it, or you might get very excited or happy about that one incident. So we would like to know something about that.
Okay. See, thinking about so many cases, I mean, it's really difficult to look at one case, because, in fact, there are many cases which, which has given us a new learning or new idea. But one particular case which I would like to share was about, uh, person who was involved into a or was suspected. I mean, unless and until there is a the case is still in court, we cannot say whether the person has committed an offense or not. But what impacted me was this person was involved or was accused of being involved into a case of a rape of a 8-year-old child. Okay, so obviously when you are looking at someone like the victim who's 8-year-old, and obviously what she had gone through, so somewhere all those emotions come up, and you still have to deal with you have to still look at this person with a completely non-judgmental attitude, because you cannot make any judgments. But obviously this case has a lot of impact on me personally, because somewhere, being a mother, obviously you need to have a balance of these two things. So when we are dealing with the case, there are some lots of uh, anxieties or emotions which we come up. But then in the process, when we are getting trained, we also learn to somewhere uh, have a balance or control on our own emotions. So you have to keep a lot of control on your own emotions. You have to be non-judgmental when you are dealing with any case. So it's very important, because ultimately it's not, we don't know whether the person has actually done or not. So you tend to get into that mode to make judgments, but then you need to somewhere pull yourself behind and say that no, you are not supposed to make the judgment, you just are supposed to do your work. If the person is involved in the crime, they would be getting punished by the court of law. So that's a very important lesson that I had to learn, that you have to keep a control on your own actions, and making decisions before you actually decide on any or give a
Ma'am, at last, ma'am, we would like you to give some message or some tips that you would like to share to people who are looking for a career in forensic psychology.
Okay, like I said, forensic psychology is a very interesting field, because if you look at entire forensic sciences, this is the only field that gives you an opportunity to directly deal or directly deal with the individuals who may be involved in a crime. At the same time, this field is not just narrowed to conduction of polygraph, BOS, or narco analysis. In fact, there are a lot more avenues in the field. For example, rehabilitation process of offenders, okay, giving them job opportunities after they have served the entire punishment. How do we go about it? Then we look at juvenile delinquency, which is a very important field in itself, like the development. So childhood, when we know that a child has been arrested for some crime, okay, but how do you bring him back to normalcy? So that is again a very important role of a forensic psychologist. Similarly, if we look at when we look at it from the if someone has committed an offense, but because of some kind of a mental illness or a mental disorder, then obviously what kind of treatment? So you can't treat same individuals with same perspective. In fact, forensic psychology is a very broad field, and we as people into the field, we have to create our own scope and spread it across our country, so that more and more people become aware of it and also get lot of opportunities to work into it. Also, another important field which I forgot to mention, where as psychologists can do lot of work, is especially counseling the victims of crime. Okay, very important aspect. So similarly, not just victims, also witnesses who have to somewhere face the perpetrator in the court of law. So how do you counsel, how do you bring them, you have to make them realize that they have to still face the perpetrator in the court. So there are so many things that as a psychology students or as a psychology academician, we can all work towards that same goal. In fact, it's a very broad field, and we can all make a lot of difference to the entire field.
Yes, ma'am. So, ma'am, it was really very nice talking to you with all the knowledge, and this is very actually my personal favorite topic, and this is very vast. So, I am pretty sure that all that you have given us, our viewers will really enjoy it. And thank you so much, ma'am, for giving us your valuable time, knowledge, and for being with us for this interview session. Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, you may now leave the meeting.